Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Bradajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Vishnu Paramahansa Vairagacharya Sadasi Svedasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sagoho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopida Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Go Premanandi. All glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschachadesha Tadane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, yesterday Vishnu Chakravarti explained about the nature of bhakti being an intrinsic part of Krishna, made up of bliss, and which descends into the devotees of the material world, and these devotees spread that bhakti to others. So bhakti is not caused by anything material, it is caused by bhakti. So if we develop bhakti, it's because we got mercy conveyed through another devotee. The devotees act as the instrument of the Supreme Lord. Sometimes Prabhupada uses that phrase, the transparent via media. Have you heard that phrase? So the devotees are the via media of Krishna's bhakti shakti, or his mercy. And the more transparent they are, the better the bhakti gets transmitted, obviously. Just like we have namabhasana and we have pure names. So if you're pure, then the power of bhakti is transmitted in a better way. Just like we have electricity. So electricity doesn't travel everywhere. It goes through conductors. And we have good conductors and we have bad conductors. So copper wire is a good conductor. So we use copper wire to conduct the electricity from the powerhouse to the light bulb. And we don't use iron wires or aluminum wires or whatever because they don't conduct so good. So people of this material world are not very good conductors. When you become a devotee, a madhyama devotee, then you become a nice conductor of the current of bhakti. And of course, we find that coppers, of course you get different grades of copper, I suppose. You're going to have impure copper and then pure copper. And then of course you can have silver wires also, they're even better, I think. And probably gold wires are even better. But not so common because they're more expensive. So similarly, we have the normal devotees, but if a devotee is more advanced, then obviously the power is more. And if it's prem bhakti, of course, it's a lot, but they're also very rare. Therefore, it's up to the devotee. He is given the free will to decide how he wants to distribute that mercy. And sometimes the prem bhaktas don't distribute very much. And generally the madhyamadhikaris do, because they like to give out the mercy and they like to preach to the innocent people, etc. So they become the main distributors of that mercy of the Supreme Lord. So bhakti is independent. It's very powerful, it's flexible, it can appear anywhere, anytime. It's not subject to rules and regulations or purity or impurity or time or place or anything. And it also gives life to all the other spiritual processes such as karma, jnana and yoga. Without that little bit of bhakti, they don't give their results. And on the other hand, even if you don't do the other processes, it's no problem for bhakti. You can still get prema. So that was the general idea. So that bhakti is transmitted by devotees to another devotee. Of course, what is that bhakti? We already had a definition of that bhakti in Nectar Devotion. It was anukulyena Krishna anusilanam. It was a cultivation of a relationship with Krishna favorably. But it had two aspects, the bhava aspect and the cheshta aspect. The active aspect, like engaging your senses, plus that mood of love for the Lord. So that is what the bhakti is, and that is what is conveyed from the devotee to another devotee, or from a guru to a disciple. In Chaitanya Charitamrita there it is said that by the mercy of Guru and Krishna you get the seed of bhakti, and you begin to cultivate that seed of bhakti. So in other words, you learn the activities and you get a little bit of that feeling of bhakti, that affectionate relationship with the Lord. It's a little thing, little seed. And then you have to cultivate that. Each devotee has to cultivate that. So the devotee is the gardener. And as we know, if you don't cultivate the plant properly, it does not grow properly. So you have to learn the proper method of cultivating that little seed of bhakti. So what we're talking about here is not namabhas or mixed bhakti. It is pure bhakti. That seed of pure bhakti. That is what comes from Krishna. So, and this is what we are cultivating. The devotees, once they get that seed of bhakti, then they treasure that seed and they try to cultivate it very nicely. But the other problem is that the devotees also, when they distribute bhakti, they look for the fertile field. They don't want to waste their time with barren fields, rocks, and whatever. It's too dry. They don't bother with those fields. So they don't preach to the faithless people. So they look for where there is fertility, that is faith, shraddha. So that shraddha is not simply a mental quality. It's actually an inclination of the jiva, of the soul. When the soul finally is ripe and it's got that tendency to believe in the Supreme Lord and believe in the process of bhakti, believe in the bhakti scriptures without questioning them. That is what faith is. And it's something that is a reorientation of the Atma away from material energy and a little bit towards Krishna, just a little bit. A little bit of faith is there. So that is the loophole by which a jiva can get the mercy of the devotees. When that is there, then the devotee will plant the seed. Okay. So once the seed is planted by the devotee, then the other person, he begins to cultivate bhakti. And we found this definition of sadhana bhakti was engage the senses. So we engage the senses at the same time we're trying to please the Lord in an affectionate way. So when that happens, then we get two qualities manifesting within that sadhana bhakti, within that practice. One is kleshagni, destruction of suffering and the causes of suffering, and subhada, appearance of good qualities. So this was covered already in the Nectar Devotion in the first chapter. These are the first two unique qualities of bhakti. So Vishnu Chakravarti explains this briefly, giving a little different angle, a little bit different angle. And these qualities appear in two types of sadhana, Vaidhi sadhana and Raganuga sadhana, two different types of sadhana, and these two qualities appear in both cases. Actually, he compares the, here's the creeper, and the little seed grows up, and you get two little leaves. So one is subhada, and one is kleshagni. And he says the upper surface is Raganuga, and the lower surface is Vaidhi Bhakti. Raganuga is more shiny and glossy, the other is a little bit rougher. But in either case, we get subhada and kleshagni manifesting. Okay. So, what is the suffering that has to be destroyed by the process of bhakti? So he analyzes suffering in terms of what is mentioned in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. There it mentions the 5 types of suffering, or the progression of suffering. The first one is called avidya, or ignorance. And we mistake that which is impermanent to be permanent, that which is full of misery to be blissful, that which is not the self to be the self. So we make big mistakes about everything. That's our ignorance. From that arises asmita, which means a sense of I. This is the false ego, the ahankara. And we identify with the material body. So each lifetime, when we're born, we identify with a particular material body. And we're more or less stuck with that without our life. Once we have identifying with the body, in that body, then we develop 2 tendencies. One is attraction. We become attracted to material objects of this world, which may be other people or things, in order to become happy. And of course, to attain those objects, to get the happiness, then we do activities. The other is dvesha, or hatred. Right? And what do we hate? Everything that causes us grief, sorrow, unhappiness, or that interrupts the happiness that we get. So we have a tendency to hate those things or avoid those things. So these are the two tendencies. In the Bhagavad Gita, we have a verse that talks about raga and dvesha. Samutena. The dualities of material life arise from raga and dvesha. And this causes the bewilderment of the living entity, and it forces the living entity into one body, into another body, and into another body. So throughout lifetime, each particular person is governed in his actions by these two things. I like or I dislike. And if I like it, I do activities to get it. If I dislike it, I do activities to avoid it, which may result in violence in many cases. So, and these arise from the identification of the body, which arises from ignorance, avidya. So avidya is the original cause, then it gives rise to ahankara, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha, which means complete absorption in our body and all the activities we're doing. And we're clinging to this life that we have, and we're trying to avoid death by any means. So these are called the five kleshas. Well, we can say the origin of suffering ultimately. One leads to the other. Of course, the next step is we do activities based on this. Then we get karma. And the karma, if it's sinful activity, causes us suffering. If we do punyas, then we get a little enjoyment. So we have enjoyment and suffering in the material world. So this is what the klesha is. And then we have the process of bhakti, destroying the klesha, or the suffering. And so all of these things are wiped out by the process of bhakti. So this is just the diagram here. So we have avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, action, and then we get karma. We do a violent action, then in some future lifetime, we get the reaction back on ourselves. To the extent that we cause suffering to other living entities, we have to get the result on ourselves. Yeah? So the stages from the action to actually getting the karma takes place over a long period of time, over many lifetimes. Yeah? It's like it takes time for a tree to bear fruit. Yeah? So year after year it grows and grows and grows, and then finally, after some time, it'll produce a fruit. So the actual karma, the experience, takes a long time to fructify over many lifetimes. So it's divided into 4 stages. The most invisible type, we don't even know it's there. And then it becomes a little more gross, slightly gross, but still not even manifested in this lifetime. Then we get a bija, which is it's getting a little closer in this lifetime. And then we got prabda, where we experience it now. So the first 2 are not even in this lifetime. The second 2 are in this lifetime, but we got the subtle stage, bija, and we got the prabda. So the bija is upcoming karmas. And we may have a little trace of them in the form of some intuition that something bad is going to happen, or a bad dream, or something that comes true later on. Like this. So that's the bija. When it actually happens, and that's called the prabda. It could be an accident or a disaster, or sickness, or whatever. So in this lifetime it's bija and prabda, and if it's going to be in future lifetimes it's aparabda and ruda. So it may take some time to manifest. So all the kleshas from the avidya down to the prabda are destroyed by bhakti. Yeah? And it may be gradual also. We do bhajana kriya, and all the way up to bhava, we may get up until bhava we get the destruction. Okay, so anyway, we get from aparabda, kuta, bij, parabda, etc. And that's the negative aspect, just destroying all of the anarthas and karmas, etc., and ignorance ultimately. And then we get manifestation of good things, subha. So this can mean a manifestation of good qualities. So these good qualities are not material qualities. They're not sattvic. They are spiritual qualities. And they begin to manifest. So the devotee becomes disinterested in material affairs. He's interested in the Supreme Lord. He shows mercy, he shows forgiveness, he gives respect, he's truthful, he's simple, equal to everybody. He shows great determination and seriousness, humility, etc. These are all qualities that manifest. They are not material qualities. They're spiritual qualities. So, in other words, when we practice bhakti, the things which are in our subtle body, the karmas, the ignorance, and all the ahankara and the subtle body, desires, all of this get destroyed, and the soul begins to manifest spiritual qualities, which will manifest later into our mind and our activities. So these two qualities begin to manifest as we begin sadhana bhakti. Of course, even the destruction of karma can take place before that. That is, if you accidentally chant the name of the Lord, for instance, you can also destroy your karma. But when you start practicing bhakti again, we can get destruction of karmas, etc., and more subtle things like destruction of ahankara and the vidya as well. And we get subhada. So we get a negative and a positive thing manifesting. So these two things begin to happen simultaneously, the destruction of suffering and appearance of good qualities, just like the two leaves come out at once from the plant. But they don't completely manifest. So therefore, in sadhana we get some manifestation, but we don't get a complete manifestation of all the wonderful qualities or destruction of all the avidya, etc. When we get into bhava and prema, then we get a fuller manifestation of all these things. So thus, because there's a gradual decrease in the anarthas and the ignorance, etc., and the karmas and whatever, and there's an increase in the good qualities and the surrender, etc., we can describe bhakti in stages. So that's what is done in nectar devotion. We have a bhajana kriya, and then anartha nivritti, nishta, ruchi, asakti, bhava, and prema. So essentially it is destruction of all these kleshas and ignorance, etc., and manifestation of the good qualities of bhakti. That's what it is. So the more the qualities of bhakti appear and the less the anarthas are there, then these determine the different stages of bhakti. So the first stage is Shraddha. Now Jiva Goswami says this is actually not bhakti, this is the qualification for bhakti. So it's an attitude within the jiva, and the qualification is not equivalent to the process. It's the qualification for the process of bhakti. So we have to have that initial faith. But once we have that qualification, it doesn't disappear when we start the process of bhakti. It continues and it gets stronger and stronger. So the attitude is there, but then the bhakti is actually the we can say the actions we do plus that internal favorable attitude towards the Lord that begins to increase and increase and increase. So after the Shraddha, then we get sadhu sangha, and by that sadhu sangha, then we get the seed planted. So in other words, we develop faith in the process of bhakti, we get some teachings, and then we begin the process of bhakti. So then we call it the bhajana kriya, that means doing the bhakti. But of course, what happens before Shraddha is, to get the Shraddha we have to have sadhu sangha also, but it is accidental. It is agata sukriti. Because we don't have faith, therefore occasionally in previous lifetimes we get some mercy somehow or other. So it is sadhu sangha, but it is accidental sadhu sangha. Then we get Shraddha, then we get sadhu sangha, then we begin the process of bhakti. However, the first stage of bhajana kriya is called anishtata, or unsteady practice. And then gradually, that will, as we go through anartha vritti, then we'll get to nishtha, steady practice. So the process of anartha vritti is taking place. But the first, when it first starts, that it's unsteady bhakti, until we come to the steady bhakti. Unless we have extraordinary cases where persons really quickly advance and they come to nishtha very quickly, or from previous lifetime they could have gone up to nishtha. But in most cases it's anishtha in the beginning, later it goes to nishtha. So what is that faith? Firm trust in the import of the bhakti scriptures. So that when you have faith and then you maybe read the Bhagavad Gita or somebody explains it to you, what is the goal of life, what is the process, then you accept it. You don't start thinking, well, why is it like this? Why is it like that? Why is Krishna God? Why we have a God? Why we need a God? You don't think like that. You just, okay, there's the Supreme God. We'll worship that God and we'll accept it as Krishna. So if you have that faith, then you can begin the process. Now if you're going to keep asking, arguing, then it's not faith. And it also is, faith is the desire to undertake the activities. When the scripture says do this, then you're eager to do it. So if we hear the scriptures and we don't want to do anything, again, that is not proper faith. So one who has that faith, and when they hear the scriptures or hear the devotees, then it's not difficult for them to start the practice. That means they have good faith. And it may take many lifetimes to get to that stage. So it may happen over many lifetimes. Sometimes it may happen very suddenly due to great mercy also. They get mercy of a devotee, then suddenly they can develop faith as well. Okay, so with that faith, then we get the sadhu sangha, we get a spiritual master, or guru, or some devotee. We take shelter of them, and we get some information about bhakti. We get inspiration to practice the process. So, following that devotee or guru's instructions, then we associate with devotees, we avoid the non-devotees, and we take shelter of superior devotees, those who are on a higher level. Which means that actually we're practicing what a Madhyamadikari does here. Associate with equals and serve the senior devotees. So this is conduct of sadhu sangha for a Madhyamadikari. So therefore one begins seriously the practice of pure bhakti, then he's actually at the Madhyamadikari stage. Before that he may be a Kanishta, he's kind of ignorant person that has some sort of faith, but he hasn't got the association. And once he gets association, he can come to Madhyama level. So then we practice, but as I said, we have the unsteady type and the steady type. So usually we have to go through the unsteady in order to get to the steady, from anishtata to nishtata. So that's the general thing. And it's obviously preferable to get to the nishtata stage, which is like being able to take care of the garden in a regular way, skillfully. Whereas anishtata means we really don't know what to do, or even if we do know what to do, we're not very regular at watering the garden or pulling out the weeds or whatever. We don't do it regularly. So nishtata means we are very attentive to doing all the practices nicely, without much force. So Vishnu Chakravarti also describes here the symptoms of anishtata. What are the symptoms of a person who begins bhakti but it's not steady? So one is called utsaha mai. Now the word utsaha means enthusiasm in the nectar of instruction, so that's a good quality, to be enthusiastic to perform bhakti. But there's a negative side also for the person beginning, and that's overconfidence and what he is and what he's doing. False confidence. Chakravarti gives the example of a little 5-year-old boy. So he goes to school. He begins school, and as soon as he starts school, then he thinks, I'm a student. I know everything. And all these students that aren't going to, all these people that are not going to school, they're all low-class people. So he has a false sense of pride because he's a devotee. So it's not based upon actual advancement, it's just based upon external, he's doing devotional service, but he hasn't advanced far at all. So that's one initiative symptom. We misidentify our position in bhakti. Another symptom of the initiative state is sometimes one is very enthusiastic to do things, devotional service like hearing, chanting, etc. And other times we have no enthusiasm for doing anything. So we some days are good, some days are bad, up and down. So sometimes we can do very nicely, sometimes we can't. So it's sporadic in our endeavors, inconstant or flickering endeavor. So that's another sign of anishtata. Another is called vyuda vikalpa, which means extensive speculation. Or we speculate a lot about what's our future, and we may have great plans for ourselves in terms of how we're going to advance. So we think, I'll become a Babaji, or I'll become a sannyasi, we can do this or that, or the next moment I'll become a nice grihasta, and like this, that. So they can't quite make up their mind what they're going to do, and they give all sorts of arguments to justify their decisions. And these decisions may keep changing all the time. So they don't quite know their future. They're very indecisive about their future, and they keep changing. Another one is Vishaya Sangra. Sangra means war, battle. Vishaya means material objects. So we're fighting with Maya all the time. And sometimes we lose. Sometimes we win. So this is the nature of the Anishtata Bhakta. So sometimes he cannot follow properly and he succumbs to Maya and he enjoys in the material world. Other times he's able to restrain himself. So he's struggling. Another one is niyama akshama, inability to follow the niyamas or the rules, which means he voluntarily accepts a certain standard, like let me chant 4 rounds or 6 rounds or 8 rounds or 16 rounds or whatever, but he's not able to do that. So every time he makes a vow, he fails. Let me chant 16 rounds, he can't do it. Let me chant 32 rounds, cannot do it. Let me chant 8 rounds, cannot do it. So, in other words, his determination not very strong. So, therefore, these are some of them. Then the last one, the 6th one, is called enjoying the waves. Taranga or Rangani. Taranga means waves. Rangani means enjoying. So, a person who likes to enjoy the waves, like the surfer here. So, this means that the waves are actually the products of bhakti. Right? So when we do the bhakti, we get many things. We may get followers, we may get assets, we may get money, we may get fame and position. So then we identify with those things and we enjoy those things, and we think, I'm progressing in bhakti because I got these followers, I got this position, etc. So in other words, we become attached to the material results of bhakti. So that's called Taranga Rangani, playing in the waves. So in other words, we can't really distinguish what is the real advancement in bhakti. We think this is a sign of advancement if we get these different things. So these are the 6, of course there's probably more symptoms, but these are 6 prominent symptoms of anishtata, unsteady bhakti. And obviously if we're at anishtata bhakti, then we won't have these problems. We won't have the war, we won't have the war with material energy, enjoying the waves, or this sometimes steady and unsteady and speculative mind, etc. Okay, that's that chapter actually. Okay, any question there? And I'll do the next chapter.
The obstacles on the path of bhakti, and where sometimes the Madhyam Adhikari neglects the devotees who are practicing, and then when new people come, then they submissive to them at the cost of neglecting the devotees like that. So how can we be cautious about that? And the other question was how to avoid the entitlement mentality.
The?
Entitlement mentality that I've done this service,
Oh.
so I'm entitled to this kind of,
Oh.
because we see that sometimes. Or
Oh.
I've been in the movement, or I'm fourth generation, and I'm entitled to.
Yeah, well, as we know, as a qualification also for chanting the holy name, Lord Chaitanya says, we're humbler than a blade of grass, we're taller than a tree, we don't expect any honor, we give honor to everybody else. So these are like preliminaries for even chanting properly. So inherent in bhakti is this idea of not expecting any position for ourselves, etc. And within bhakti we find in the first principles outlined by Rupa Goswami, he says that we have a great willingness to just give up everything in favor of serving Krishna. So we don't really want material acquisition, material fame and name and anything like that, or respect or anything. We're content simply to serve the Lord. So it's like a preliminary condition. And then we also have in surrender, this idea of surrendering everything to the Lord, which Jiva Goswami says is the first anga of bhakti. And then he says we accept what is favorable, we don't, and we reject what is unfavorable. And then we always very thinking ourselves the lowest of the low, etc. And we're ready to offer everything, Atmanavedana, we're offering everything to the Lord. So if we can have this attitude all the time, then we can actually be successful at bhakti. But if we're, on the other hand, we're craving some sort of position, etc., then this will interfere. This is an anartha which will interfere with our bhakti and hold us back. So we have to be a little bit introspective about that. What was the first one? The
Madhyam Adhikari, Manashiksha is the obstacle where the Madhyam Adhikari neglects the devotees who are practicing at the and gives more attention to a newcomer maybe because they're famous or they have money or they just want to bring people in because they want to have the fame that I wrote this person.
well, again, that's the same product. That's this Trangarangani. And also we saw that in the offenses there was the preaching to the faithless people. So the idea was if we're looking for people who got money and influence and we start preaching to them, then basically we are preaching for the wrong reason, for material reasons. And rather really have to look for the faith, not for the money or their position or whatever else like that. So again, it's a material reason. So if that's constant, then obviously we're going to fall eventually because of that.
In terms of bhakti destroying our sins, just reflecting on how this actually looks in a practical sense, I'm thinking in terms of my own life, like the more I engage in bhakti, the more it brings my sins to the surface, and then also gives me the tools in which to be able to unravel them, or I even find this happens more in like an automatic way, or it does it like...
Yeah. Well, we can say one symptom is when we start practicing bhakti, then we become less attached to everything in the material world. So constantly those things which we have desire for, which may lead to sinful activity, we become less interested in those things as we progress in bhakti. Now, some of these things can be more difficult to give up than others, but nevertheless, as we progress, we get less and less and less and less interest as we go on. So in that sense, the anarthas are decreasing as we go on. So that's what we call the pop bijas, the seed of sin. Those things become less and less as we go on because we're developing more attraction for Krishna and less attraction to everything in the material worlds and less attraction to our material body. So then naturally all these things will decrease.
Maharaj, I wonder if you could, we're hearing about inattentive chanting Hare Chaitanya, and one thing came up to me was like people are chanting japa during arati or during the kirtan, they're sitting in their So they probably can't hear themselves chanting, but they're doing japa instead of participating in arati. Is that considered offensive?
Well, I suppose what they're doing is trying to fulfill their vow. So we have a choice whether we could fulfill the vow that day or not fulfill the vow, or take part fully in the other activity and be attentive there or not. So, or else if we fulfill the vow but we're inattentive. So it's a little bit of a, let's say, difficult choice to make in one sense. But ultimately we should choose to fulfill the vow and also do it attentively. That should be the best choice somehow or other. So we just have to make some arrangement for that.
The other question I had was, a lot of devotees say that when you take initiation, the guru takes all your karma. Then we hear Vishwanath that by just doing bhakti
itself destroys the karma. Yeah.
What is the need of all initiation now, because you get rid of all your karma. But if you're doing bhakti yoga anyway, according to this, then
it's already gone.
What is
In any case, the devotee is not really interested in destroying karma. He's interested in getting bhakti, so that's not a significant factor. But I've got a whole presentation on that, who destroys the karma. But the idea is that that's one idea. Now, if you hadn't done any bhakti before you took initiation, then yes, he teaches you bhakti. In that sense, your karma gets destroyed. If you hadn't, because previously there was no chanting Hare Krishna before you take initiation. There was no Harinam. It was only initiation, get a deity mantra, worship the deity. So therefore, you wouldn't be having the mantra before you took initiation, so you couldn't worship the deity, so you couldn't destroy your karmas. So only after you got the instructions from the guru and got the mantra, then you could destroy your karmas. Maybe that's the logic behind that. The other point is mentioned in Hari Bhakti Vilas that when anybody takes a position of responsibility, then he shares the karma of the dependent person for whom he's responsible, and if that person commits a sin, he also has to bear some of the result of that. But it's not just for guru, it's for anyone. The king takes 1/6 of the karma of his citizens because he's responsible they don't commit sin. The husband's responsible for the wife. If she commits a sin, he gets part of the result. A teacher, just a purohit or whatever, not a real guru, a purohit, a teacher, he has students. If they commit some sin, he's responsible. So it's not just the Diksha Guru, but it's all positions of responsibility share the results of their dependent when they commit some bad activity, whatever. Doesn't mean they're completely responsible, but they share some. No. Otherwise, then everyone just gets initiated and they can do anything they want. They don't get any results, so that's not good. Okay, so, oops. Okay, so that's the next one. Third shower. Anartana vritti. So we have that initiative state where there's those 6 qualities. And then as we do bhakti, anartana vritti takes place. So these bad symptoms should be destroyed, and everything else, let's say the karmas and the desires and the ahankara to some extent gets lessened as we begin to practice bhakti. So Vishnu Chakravarti divides anartas into 4 types. Previous sinful activity, previous pious activity, offenses, and imperfectly performed bhakti. So of course the first 2 are more or less similar because it's all karma. Anarthas arising from your good or bad karmas, from offenses, and from imperfectly performed bhakti. So now once we're doing bhakti, then we get some anarthas arising through the bhakti itself. The other is offenses, the other is previous activities and sinful activities or pious activities. We get some problem with that. Okay, so sinful activities, then we get all these different kleshas. We'll get raga, dvesha, attraction, repulsion, and abhinavesh, absorption in our material body. Then we commit activities, then we get some bad results or some enjoyment results. So these are the kleshas, modification of the kleshas. And from pious activities, we get some very nice sattva guna enjoyment. So that can act also as a obstacle for us in bhakti. We get attached to that. So either we're battling with our miserable condition due to sinful activities, or we're enjoying very nicely due to our punyas. And these can create anarthas for us in bhakti. Or we may also develop an interest in liberation, because sattva gives rise to atmagyan. So then you get interested in, let's get out of the material world and go for impersonal liberation. So that could be a result of past punyas as well. Or if you do nishkama karma yoga, then again you can end up going in the direction of mukti. Yeah, so the byproducts of all of this can lead to the anarthas, which are due to sinful activity. Yeah, it's like that. So, due to the actions, we do sins, we do violence, we end up with suffering, and we get some hellish existence of some sort, either on earth or in hellish planets or whatever. And if we do pious activities and compassionate acts, then we get some enjoyment in this lifetime, or we get heavenly positions somewhere. And so these can both be anarthas for us. Okay, then we get anarthas arising from aparads. These are referring to the nam-aparads, which we already discussed. So, we do some aparads by accident. We are not quite aware of it, and then somebody gets offended by some activity we do or whatever. Or out of ignorance we may consider the name as exaggeration or something like that, but we're not really maliciously trying to degrade the name. So these are called unconscious operands. So and we don't really know, that we've committed them. So we can remove the effect by constant chanting. So if the aparad is conscious and we have a malicious attitude, for instance, towards devotees or the Supreme Lord, etc., or the holy name, and we start doing activities, then the effect is very difficult to remove. Yeah. So the unintentional creates a little obstacle, but the intentional aparad creates a big blockage, so that we can't get any mercy anymore. Yeah? So it's a problem for us. So Vishnu Chakravarti doesn't explain all of the nam-aparads, but he just goes through, I think, 3 or 4 of them here. So sadhu ninda is this animosity and criticism of the Vaishnavas. So then he describes how that the remedy has to be repentance. We have sincere regret for the offense we've committed to the Vaishnava. Second step is apologies, personally going to the person and apologizing, and giving proper respect to the person after that point. We cannot give the excuse, well, the Vaishnava is not really upset with me, so therefore I don't have to apologize. And if he doesn't accept the apology, then all one can do is continually chant the holy name. And if one avoids the apology and says, I'll just chant, then it creates worse aparad. It gets worse. It doesn't get improved. So your chanting, it doesn't have any effect. In other words, it gets worse, the aparad. And if you don't apologize because you say, well, actually that Vaishnava does have some faults, then one commits more offense. So then again, one is in a worse position. So if we do the proper method and we continue bhakti and chant, then we can minimize the effect of the aparad. Okay, the second aparad is misunderstanding the position of Vishnu and thinking that Vishnu and Shiva and Brahma are all on the same level. So obviously this is due to ignorance. Or maybe we get influenced by others and we start thinking Shiva is supreme or whatever. So we do have to be careful that we understand the tattvas very thoroughly. So Vishnu is completely independent. Shiva is a form of Vishnu, so in that sense he is independent also. If he is, sometimes Shiva is a jiva, so then can be covered by the gunas to a slight degree also. So then he's different from Vishnu. Brahma is usually an empowered jiva, and therefore, again, can be subject to the gunas. Sometimes it's the Supreme Lord, in which case he's not covered by the gunas. In any case, we understand that Vishnu is in a superior position to Shiva and Brahma, so we cannot put them on the same level. Like that. So here's another one, disrespect for the Shrutis. So here Vishnu Chakravarti takes Shruti as meaning the Vedas. So don't criticize the Vedas because and say the Vedas are all karma kanda, so we reject the Vedas. You can't say that. So it is true that the Shrutis or Vedas, they recommend karma kanda and gyan kanda. Enjoyment and going to Svargaloka by doing punyas, and jnana for liberation. Though the Vedas recommend these processes, we understand they are not the ultimate process, but they are steps towards bhakti only. And in that sense, we should not criticize. So, if we start criticizing the Vedas, then, or the followers of Karmakanda, etc., then we should actually remedy that by praising these Shrutis and understanding the true position of these processes in relation to bhakti, and chant the holy name. Anarthas arising from bhakti. So we may say, well, how can anarthas arise from bhakti? Bhakti is anartha nivritti. It's destroying all the anarthas. So how can we create more anarthas? So the explanation is that when we cultivate bhakti, we can get material assets, worship, fame, position. This is what would happen to Rangarangani. So if we become very attracted to these things, that becomes anartha. So that's an anartha that arose from bhakti. It didn't come from punya. It didn't come from karma or anything like that. It arose due to the process of bhakti itself, and then we get attracted to those things. So, of course, if we are practicing nicely and we're mature, then we won't get attracted to them. But then, if we're immature, then we may get into this Tarangarangani, and then we get attracted to them. So this could be an anartha for us. So. All of these anarthas, that due to sin and piety and faulty bhakti and aparad, are all destroyed, but they're destroyed at different rates. So in the first yellow column we have the stages of bhakti, bhajana kriya, nishta, ruchi, asakti, bhava, prema, and then siddha means go to the spiritual world. So the karmas, the anarthas due to karmas, that is due to sin or piety, are in the first stages of bhajana kriya. They're a little removed, and as we go on in bhajana kriya, they're more removed, and then by nishta stage, they're mostly removed, and then finally at the end of asakti, all the effects of these karmas are removed. The anarthas due to faulty bhakti, that is attraction to fame or money or position, etc., a little removed in the first stage, a little bit more in the second part of bhajana kriya, and then finally we come to nishta, mostly gone. And by end of ruchi stage, all those things are completely gone. The aparads are slower to get removed. So they're a little bit removed in the first stage of bhakti. When we get to nishta, more removed, and in bhava, slightly more removed, and in prema, mostly gone, and in siddha, nothing at all. So the aparads take longer to remove. The effects of the aparads will continue longer than the karmas or the faulty bhakti. And they continue into bhava slightly. Prema, generally there isn't, but unfortunately, because we're in the material body, accidentally, somebody may get offended. That's not an intentional aparad, but because we're in the material world, we do have other imperfect people, they may get offended. So that could cause a slight problem, as we see in the case of Rupa Goswami laughing at the sadhu, and then suddenly his bhakti decreased. And he didn't know. He was laughing because of Krishna's pastimes. And the sadhu thought, he's laughing at me. So he got disturbed. And then consequently, that was like an offense. So therefore, Rupa Goswami's bhakti decreased. But it wasn't his fault at all. But then one can get affected by that also. So if one is seated in the spiritual world, then there's no problem at all. So anyway, the aparads take longer to remove. They're more serious, so the effect is longer lasting. Huh? Okay, like this. So I think we had this before. So as we progress in bhakti, then gradually the attraction to increases, the anarthas decrease and decrease, and we come to bhava stage, end of asakti, all the karmas are removed basically, and all the other things are removed, but the aparad will continue even into the bhava stage. The little gray section at the end, it goes into bhava stage also. So and that is why we say beware of the anarthas, because the effect can continue and continue into bhava stage also. It's harder to remove the effects of aparads than other anarthas. Okay. Vishnu Chakravarti also makes a very interesting comment here, and that is, says this gradual stage, anarthana vritti, then nishtaruchi asakti, and then bhava and prema. He says this is for people who commit namaparad. That's what slows the process. If we don't have any namaparad, then the stages are much quicker. And if you do namabhas even without aparad, you can destroy the anarthas immediately, as in the case of Ajamil. He destroyed all of his karmas in one go because he had no aparads at all. And that was just namabhas. So there we see that the namaparad also slows the whole process down. So, aparad, the effect of aparad is like getting sick. We get the virus and we get sick. And once you get sick, you cannot do your activities properly. So you commit the aparad, then bhakti cannot be performed properly. The whole process of bhakti loses its potency and we have lack of taste. At the same time, the only solution is to chant. But we have no taste for chanting. So this is what makes aparad so difficult to recover from. Once we lose a taste, we don't want to take the medicine anymore. So, if we are intelligent, then we will take the medicine, even though it's bitter, and we continue to chant, and then we get a little bit cured, then we get a little taste, and the offense lessens and lessens, and taste manifests a little more. It's easier to chant, and then finally we're able to do bhakti steadily again. So in that way we can progress to sadhana and prema. But if we don't make any correction, we don't take shelter of the holy name, then eventually, that because we have no taste, then we just stop the whole process of bhakti. So that is the problem with anarthas, or with aparads. So sometimes it looks like a devotee will suffer, or he doesn't have prema, but he didn't commit any offense. So why does this happen? So one reason is that the name hides its powers. So it may look like you're still suffering from karmas even when you don't have any karmas. So for instance, even Ajamil had all of his karmas removed when he named his son Narayana, but he did not appear to be any different for the rest of his life. And he even committed more sinful activities after that. So how can his karmas be removed because he's so sinful? But actually all of his karmas were gone. But no, even he didn't know they were gone. So this is an example of the name hiding its powers and its qualities. The karma is gone, but it doesn't look like they're gone. The karmas are gone. And in other cases, we find that it looks like suffering, but actually it's simply the arrangement of the Lord, and that we see in the case of Nityasiddha devotees, like the Pandavas. It looked like they suffered for many years. Why would they suffer? Obviously, they don't have any karma. So that's an arrangement of the Supreme Lord. So sometimes the Lord makes an arrangement that looks like suffering for certain pastimes, but we can't say that those devotees have real karma. It's very difficult to get rid of karma because we're always producing new karma. When we're living, we're always producing new karma. For now, we're expending our old karma because we get suffering in this lifetime, so then that karma is gone. But then we're doing activities in this lifetime. We're creating more karmas. Sure. So then we have to get another body for that. Plus we got a backload of karmas which haven't even appeared yet. that we've committed in many, many lifetimes, and we haven't enjoyed them in this life or past lifetimes, and they're all waiting for us also. So this is called aparabdha karmas, a backload of karmas. And then we're producing more karmas now. So therefore we have to take another body, and then we do more karmas the next lifetime, and then we have to take another body. So it's very difficult to get rid of that unless we have a process of destroying karmas.
Okay, so then with the karma that we come into this world with, because everybody everybody comes with their baggage or whatever the karma may be. I think yesterday's class you spoke a little bit about chanting purely, and that is the destroyer, and that dissolves the individual's karma.
Yeah.
Now,
even impurely will destroy it. Accidentally will also destroy it.
So because I think I'm getting a little bit maybe in my head about this, but I don't think I chant very clearly yet, and maybe that's because of I don't know, I might be in my head sometimes or whatever the case may be, and I don't know if that has to do with my karma or my inability to be able to do that, and that's maybe blocking me from being able to chant purely. So then I think to myself, well, will karma eventually be dissolved? Because I think that it's kind of in the way of progressing forward. I don't know.
So even impure chanting will destroy karmas. So we have the case of Ajamil. He had no devotion at all, and he just accidentally said, I named my son Narayana, Vishnu. Okay. And then he got all his karmas destroyed. Okay. But how it happened was he had no offenses at all at that stage. So it happened very quickly. So if he already had some offenses along the way, somehow or other, then it would have been a slower process of destruction of karmas. Nevertheless, it takes place. So even accidentally, or if you're doing bhakti and it's impure, still it starts to destroy your karmas, but not completely, gradual destruction.
Okay. And one more question. I think you kind of answered it a bit. So those who are elevated and, pardon my ignorance for the language, but a little bit more of a higher consciousness and in line with Krishna, and who have studied the texts, their ailments and all of that, I know you said, is that because of the Lord's arrangement, even though their karmas have been slowly resolved? Is that because the Lord has arranged that? It's described in the Brahma Sutras that even one who's in the highest level, prema, who has no karmas, no aparad, nothing, it will appear as if he does have karmas, because he's got a body, and he may get sick, he gets accidents, and he even dies. So that looks like karma, because you die because of karma, and you have accidents because of karma. So it looks like he has karma, but actually this is all arrangement of the Lord at that stage. Right. So the devotee may not have any karma, but there's an appearance of karma even for devotees, and therefore they'll go through all these different accidents and whatever sicknesses, and then they finally die also. So it's an arrangement of the Lord. And then we say, why? Well, one answer is that the Lord likes to show that karma is inevitable for everybody. So he gives them a little shadow of karma. Is there any way to measure? Is it quantified?
What, the karmas?
Yeah.
Well, the devotee actually doesn't. The thing is that the devotee, as he advances, he's less concerned about the body. So he doesn't care what happens to the body anyway.
I guess that's true.
So then he's always joyful anyway, no matter if he's sick or whatever accident, or he dies young. He's joyful. So he's completely detached anyway. So he doesn't care about it.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm wondering about the anarthas that arise from bhakti. Is it only from improperly executing bhakti, or is it also properly anarthas?
Well, if we properly perform bhakti, we may get those assets, we may get the position, etc., but we won't get attached to it. But if we properly do our bhakti, then we can get very attached to these results, and so we'll long for the position. When we get it, we're very happy with it, or we get the money, we like it, and we enjoy it, etc. So, if we perform bhakti properly, we won't be attached to these things at all, so they won't become an anartha.
Or we can say because we have a misunderstanding of what the nature of bhakti is that we do this. The one example is given of a gardener, or the farmer. So in India, they grow rice in Bengal. And they have to plant the seeds, and then they put the water in, and they watch the plant grow, and then at a certain time they harvest it. But there's also a very clever weed, and when it grows, it looks exactly like the rice, young rice, called shamgach. And so if you're an ignorant farmer, you cultivate your nice weeds and you think they're rice, and they grow and grow and grow, and then finally you're waiting for rice and no rice comes. You just get a bunch of weed seeds. So the excellent or the intelligent farmer will understand this is a weed, but the foolish farmer will not, and he'll mistake the weed for the actual plant. So we can be like that also. We may think that the weeds that are growing up, that is the money and all this, that's the bhakti, and we get attached to that thing, and we think because I got more money I'm more advanced. So that's our ignorance. So we do have to have some knowledge and some little bit of sense control to understand what is real bhakti.
Maharaj, thank you very much for your wonderful contribution. I just wondered sometimes in the beginning of our devotional service, it's a bit confusing, and like there are so many different types of diseases. It's like when we're sick, what we do is that we go to the doctor, and we say, okay, I feel like this, I feel like that, so the doctor prescribes medicines. Okay, I take these pills and you'll be all right, point there, whatever, vitamin, antibiotic, or whatever it is. So would it have been simpler to go to a spiritual doctor or a spiritual master where you say, okay, you can scan me and tell me where I am, and I'll go and progress from this point further. Because by myself I can't really understand, or I think I may be there, but maybe not. I may be there, but maybe not. And I'm so confused, or maybe not clear.
Yeah.
So I just wondering what would be the best way to progress in spiritual life to be myself.
Yeah, well, that's why we emphasize sadhu sangha. We should always have association of devotees. So the Madhyam Adhikari associates with like devotees, and that's one level, and also senior devotees. So with the like devotees, at least he can compare his level and see if he's coming up to that same level and he's the same healthy standard. If he's a little bit weird and different, then maybe something is wrong because he's not the same as everybody else and his standards are quite different. So and he can ask them. If they cannot answer, then he goes to the senior devotee, and the senior devotee has a better perspective, so he can analyze his situation and see if there's a weakness here, or improper to perform bhakti, or this anartha is giving problem, and then he can give a solution in terms of bhakti. So that's why association is very important. So we do have books, but generally people read books and often they misunderstand or they overlook certain things in books, so that's why we also need the experience of devotees to help out the other devotees. So it's not just books, but we need the association of devotees as well. And that's why scripture always says you have to go to Guru, and then he'll give you the instructions or whatever. So that may be Diksha Guru, but it could be Shiksha Guru also.
It says sometimes spiritual masters travel around the world, and how much association you get from the...
Yeah, so that's Diksha Guru. So then you get, so you have Shiksha Guru.
So you need to...
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I have a question on when the child comes of a certain age, and we have this basic ceremony where the child chooses the books or the money and different things, and the gold, and I think in previous times also the weapons or the bracelets, what are the tools they have. So how much, like we see sometimes parents over the years, we see how they base the child's whole life on what they chose. Instead of having a faith in bhakti, that bhakti will override whatever they choose and how parents practice or what to do with the child.
Okay.
So how to find that good balance also, that doing astrology for the child, having some guidance of maybe what kind of nature they have, and then bhakti, how to find that.
So that's some traditional ceremony. It's not absolute. So of course when it happens and then they choose scripture over everything else, okay, it's very good as far as devotion is concerned. But we don't take that choice as absolute. And generally the qualities of a child are, some of them are hereditary, due to father and mother. Some are environmental and educational. So when you raise the child, then according to how you raise them, then they develop certain tendencies also. And then education also. If you educate them a certain way, then they can develop those tendencies as well. So it's not just a nature itself, but it's how that nature is also developed in certain ways. So the end product is what that child will be, a combination of, natural tendencies plus education, environment, etc. So therefore the parents can't simply rely on what the child chose when he was 1 year old or 2 years old or whatever. And they have to observe the child as it grows also. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says you should only decide actually when they're about 16 or 17 years old, when they're mature. Then you can decide what the actual character and tendency of a child is. Okay. Hare Krishna.